In episode 2, Alfie takes Jessica to the police. Alfie ends up getting questioned by the police, which pisses him off because he had nothing to do with it. He gets saved by Aziz. He tells Alfie that when Jessica finally came to from that trance-like state, she wasn't right. He then asks Alfie who hired him, and Alfie explains it was the nanny, and that's when Aziz shows Alfie Jessica's real nanny, and it's not the woman that Alfie talked to. Alfie got played. Aziz actually instructs Alfie to dig around some more, find out anything he can on the situation, and then he sends Alfie on his way. Alfie heads home and runs into his mother, who is all dolled up. She's going on a date, but she tells Alfie that she's going to work. She just decided to look nice that day. A little while after his mom leaves, though, Thomas Wayne shows up at the door with Samantha. When Alfie brings up the fact that his mom was watching Samantha, that's when the truth comes out, that his mom lied to him. He starts off by telling Alfie that his father might be interested in hiring him to do some work for Wayne Enterprises. If money pays well, and he'll put his father in contact with him. But the reason that Thomas showed up is because he's a little bit concerned for Martha. He finally confronted her about what his dad talked to him about, the whole she works for MI5, and she had to come clean, but she doesn't tell him all the details. She downplays the whole license to kill point. Alfie, however, gives Thomas no information, just telling Thomas that he should trust his wife. And while Thomas was trying to figure out what his wife does, his wife was meeting with Lucius Fox at a safe house. She has the file of the dead CIA agent, and they're tasked with trying to figure out the whole backstory. While looking at the file, Lucius notices that the dead CIA agent's skin has a chemical all over it that is given off when fragrance wood is burned. But they couldn't identify the source, which leads Lucius to believe that it's probably rare. In layman's terms, Martha says it means rich hippies. It's not much to go on, but Martha packs her things and tries to take that lead and see where it follows, while Lucius takes the elevator down to his office. Not too far away, Alfie heads to work himself. He heads into the office and he's telling Chappie about the fact that his mother lied to him. And that's when the woman who was playing Jessica's nanny shows up, but she's in bad shape because she's been stabbed. She tells Alfie that she's an actor. She was hired to do this job, and that's it. Alfie asks her who hired her to do the job, and she tells him that they wore dark suits, they had the same haircut. She's pretty sure they were Americans. When she saw about the thistles, she started beating herself up over everything. She thought she was doing the right thing. She left her house to tell Alfie the truth, and that's when she was attacked by a guy right outside of her apartment. Chappie runs off to call an ambulance, but he also gets a phone call from Dave Boy. Dave Boy was at the hospital watching over Jessica. But it wasn't just Dave Boy, it was a police officer who was standing guard at her door. When Dave Boy left for tea, he returned to notice that the police officer was knocked out with a syringe in his neck, and Jessica was gone. Dave Boy was able to track her down, and when he went to go take her back, Dave Boy was attacked by a guy that fits the very description the fake nanny was referring to. But unlike the nanny, Dave Boy was able to fight this guy off and kill him. He knew, though, that Jessica was not safe at the hospital, so he had to take her to a safe space, and the only place he could think of was Sandra's apartment. So he calls Alfie up to tell him everything that went down and the fact that he and Jessica are currently at Alfie's ex's place. Not the best news for Alfie, but what he's noticing is the fact that whoever hired the fake nanny and whoever had Jessica do what she did, they're trying to tie up loose ends. That's the biggest concern. So Alfie heads over to Sandra's place, and when he gets there, it's pretty awkward. Sandra's having a party, and she's definitely done a lot better for herself in the last 5 years, while Alfie has primarily stayed the same. They make small chit-chat, and then Alfie meets Sandra's new boyfriend. He's also a musician. After a little bit of back and forth, Sandra tells Alfie where he can find Dave Boy and Jessica. Alfie goes and finds them and asks Dave Boy, what do you think? I mean, could she have done this? And Dave Boy says, no. Look at her. She's a wreck. Someone else influenced her. And Alfie says, yeah, somebody who wanted the Thistles dead, who had a lot of resources and manpower. They know they need to get to the bottom of this, so they ask Sandra if Jessica can stay for a little bit, and they head off to go to Sister Susan's place to see if they can find any leads. But they aren't the only ones who show up there. So did Martha Wayne. Martha had heard all about Sister Susie's cult, and it led her right to her doorstep. Sister Susie didn't want to let her in, so Martha found an alternative way in the place, the back door. But unlike when Alfie and Dave Boy showed up the first time, there's nobody in there. Martha starts poking around, and then she's nearly attacked by Sister Susie, who she ends up socking in the face. She sits Susie down and she shows her a picture of the CIA agent, and sure enough, Susie recognizes the guy. She tells Martha that they just showed up one day. This guy, the rest of the Americans, and Dr. Glubb. They said they were from the Peace Corps and they had a new experimental drug and they needed test subjects. Even though Susan knew that that was a lie, she didn't care because the money was good. And she had subjects. She had her followers. So even though that she knew that they were CIA, she still let them use her followers as guinea pigs. Dr. Glubb seemed to be the one that was in charge. But she has no idea where he is. He left one night about a week ago, never came back. The CIA guys left a couple days later. As for what the drug did, Susan also has no idea. She didn't really notice anything. But she also wasn't allowed to watch, and she didn't really care. Susan then asked Martha, "Aren't you here about the thistles?" And Martha hasn't even thought of the thistles. But then they hear a commotion from around the corner. And that commotion is actually Alfie. Alfie and Dave Boy were waiting outside, and they noticed that two guys fitting the description of the CIA agents showed up at the door. So they followed them in. They knocked them out. That caused the commotion. It distracted Martha. And with Martha distracted, Sister Susie took her opportunity to knock Martha out. But it doesn't end well for Susie. Because when the other two CIA agents come in the room, they shoot her in the head, tying up another loose end. They're about to shoot Martha until they're shot by Dave Boy and Alfie. Martha eventually comes to, and she fills Alfie and Dave Boy in on what Sister Susie told her about the fact that everything going on was an experiment. They then notice that there's a camera with a microphone hidden in a closet. Alfie theorizes that the drug that the CIA came up with, they must have given it to Jessica, and that caused her to kill her parents. They don't know why the CIA would even care about the thistles, but the weird thing is that when they dropped Jessica off at home, she was fine. And Martha brings up that maybe it's a delayed reaction, that something triggers her. And that is dangerous. The fact that they don't know what the trigger is, the fact that it could be anything, and mainly the fact that they're not with Jessica. She's at Sandra's place. So they run off. And as they're leaving to go back to Sandra's place, Martha notices that the camera was made by Wayne Enterprises, which is more concerning for her. But Alfie and Dave Boy's worst fears come true. Because indeed, Jessica was drugged up, and there was indeed a trigger. And that trigger just so happened to be Sandra's hit song. And when it comes on the record player, she goes into a murdering spree. She kills everybody at the party, and she's about to kill Sandra until Alfie and Dave Boy bust in and shoot her in the head. But back over at the Wayne house, Thomas and Patrick have another conversation. Patrick apologizes for how the conversation the other day went, but he inquires as to if Thomas approached Martha about what they discussed. And even though Thomas did, he doesn't tell his father anything. His father keeps on prodding, and it gets to the point where Thomas lies, saying that he knew about Martha's secret life the whole time. He just didn't want to reveal anything to Patrick. Patrick does ask Thomas, "Did you ask about the missing employee?" And Thomas says no. Martha still thinks you're here to meet your granddaughter. This starts a bit of an argument between the two, with Patrick trying to hammer home once again the severity of the situation. And eventually Thomas says, "I do want to help you. I want to fix this relationship. But you need to leave Martha out of this." He tells his dad about Alfie, and that Alfie can find his missing employee. And when Patrick gets annoyed, Thomas says, "Relax. I don't know any details. But I will give you Alfie's number once you give me these details on why everything is so important." Patrick explains to Thomas that Dr. Glubb was in charge of something called Operation Lullaby State, which was a psychokinetic drug, aka mind control. In a nutshell, this experiment was to create efficient killing machines that wouldn't even think about the repercussions. Thomas is so disgusted that his father has anything to do with this that he throws Alfie's number at him and walks out of the room. And then finally, a little bit of an update on Mrs. P's date. It was going great until the guy informed her that his advertisement was actually code for "let's hook up right then and there." And Mrs. P, she's not that kind of girl, so she walked out. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.